Hi there! Hope that you have been having a great day and that this week started on a positive note. I'm going to be joining today a great colleague and friend, and we're going to be discussing a lot on interior architectures and atmospherics. So I'm going to look at these atmospherics in detail as it is a very important variable in creating customer excitement and customer experiences. And many companies specialize in retail atmospherics and design, and they allow today brands to really reflect their identities and connect with their customers in a better way and more engaging way. So I'm going to connect with Nabil, and we're going to be discussing a lot on his work, his line of work, and the company in which he works. Hi, Nabil.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
I'm great. What about you?
Perfect. Great to join you. And thank you for joining me this evening. We have a lot to discuss about.
Exactly. I'm super
And
excited for this.
yes, and you're going to tell us many things related to interior design, to retail atmospherics, and we're going to conceptualize all of this in the pop-up retail atmospherics. But first of all, before we start, let's talk a little bit about Luca, the architecture consulting and project management agencies in which you're currently working, and that specializes mainly in aspects related to retail and hospitality design. So we're going to look with you, first of all, at what Luca does and in which types of projects it specializes, and then we're going to talk about your line of work.
Perfect. So, hello everyone. So I'm working with Lucas since 2017 in project management for interior architecture and project management, everything related to retail mainly. But of course, we work as well for everything related to hospitality, common spaces, and we started working recently with to re renovate a lot of stadiums and common areas in stadiums. So lately, personally, I've been working for everything related to retail architecture, for luxury brands, cosmetics and fashion. And we are a group of 33 interior architects, and we have one engineer as well.
Mhm.
So this is how we are divided in our work.
Perfect. And if we just can highlight once more that most of the projects that you work with can also be related to the fashion and cosmetics industry,
Yes.
especially the luxury industry, and that the company works with many renowned brands such as, we name a few,
Yeah.
Balenciaga.
Balenciaga, Givenchy, couture and cosmetics. We have Christian Louboutin, we have Clarins, Yves Saint Laurent, a lot of brands from L'Oréal, a lot of brands from Puig, which is a cosmetics group. We have Estée Lauder as well. Um, and we are looking for more fashion, apparently.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, Nabil, what about your line of work? So, what do you do in terms of design? What does your job consist of in terms of design?
So lately, it depends. Actually, it depends from a mission to another. It depends from with which group I'm working with. Mostly, I'm a project management in architecture department at a brand. So I joined the brand for a specific period of time. This period can be renewed for a longer term. It depends on the project. It depends on the demand that the group has. And I can have different phases of
Missions.
work. Exactly.
Yes.
It can be different phases of work. It can go from the conceptual design. It can go from the planning of the construction to the handing over of the projects.
Okay, so basically, it really depends on what the brand asks of you and what type
Exactly.
of mission is needed. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between a generic term that is interior design and what is interior retail design. Why do we need today to concentrate on the retail aspect of architecture?
So for me, it's going to be a little bit more personal what I'm going to tell you. So and it's going to be from my experiences. The retail design and retail architecture, let's say it like this. I think it's more related to the client, what the client wants. So the space that we are conceiving, it's going to be more directed to the client. So whenever this client is going to receive people at their space, place, or whatever area we are designing, it's going to be more an aspect of how he wants to show what he is. And retail design is, I'm going to say, it's a little bit more commercial. It's more, even if it's luxury or mass design, it's the same thing. I believe that it's going to be targeted to the client. So the client, whenever the client is going to enter this space, he or she have to feel that they're relatable to this space. So in order to transform this person that is looking at a product to a customer at the end. So
Okay,
this is the
so
element
we
that's
are
going to
talking
be.
about designs that are customer centric. We are talking about conception of designs that put the customer at the heart of the process and think about the customer up and foremost.
Exactly. So it has to it's a mix of several things. It's the mix of the marketing, it's the mix of the brand identity, and all of these elements are targeted specifically in order to make the customer relatable, to feel relatable with the brand.
Okay, so
And of course,
to create a connection actually between that customer and the brand.
exactly.
Okay, and you were saying?
And I was saying that it differs from a region to another. So and we're gonna cover that later on, I know, but the designs that we do in the Middle East can be different from the design that we do in North America. It differs from the design that we do in Asia. So it all differs. So even one brand can have several ways of displaying what they are in order to make these population relating to the space.
So if we can recap to all those who were joining us at the moment, we can say that with respect to interior retail design, the design has to relate to the brand's identity, that's for sure, but it has to put the customer at heart and can be reflected differently based on the cultural aspects or regional aspects in which the retail is being developed.
Exactly.
Nabil, what's the difference between, in terms of design and retail design, between luxury and mass or maybe middle-end brands?
So for me, luxury and mass architecture, in terms of architecture, it's going to be a lot mixed. What differs is going to be more a job of the visual merchandising. So you're gonna have a difference of the product, of the lines of products that you're going to display, and this affects a little bit the architecture. course, you're gonna have as well the difference between in the budgeting. You're gonna have the difference in the way the brand wants to show itself for the public. So in luxury, you have the boutiques, the corners, the brand by itself. It's going to be more or less alienated from the other brands, or they're going to have this cover in order to segment the brand from another brand, so you can really see you can
So
really
it has
see
to stand out. You mean
exactly.
it has to look, it has to stand out, and it has to really mark itself vis-a-vis other brands that might be around it.
Exactly.
And Nabil, you pointed out a very important issue related to the job of the visual merchandiser. Most of the times, I think when we're designing spaces, we do not communicate with visual merchandisers, and hence we might have spaces that are less functional or less relevant. So,
Yeah.
what is the connection between a visual merchandiser and a retail interior designer, and what type of information needs to be exchanged? We thought about, yes, the merchandise, but what else could we talk about?
So ideally, in a very perfect world, these two entities, they should work hand in hand. But you have different strategies for brands. You have the brands that where you have the visual merchandising completely disconnected from the architectural department. You have the other brands where they are working hand in hand, and you have sometimes when they are rivals. And I think this is not to be covered, but this is the reality
Reality.
everywhere. And so. I'm going to tell you about the experience, for example, that I had with the shoe brand Louboutin. It was a very nice experience because they work so much hand in hand. We have a lot of meetings together. They give us so at the beginning you're going to have the brief. The brief is going to be directed directly to the visual merchandising in order to understand what kind of products are going to be displayed in that specific area. We get that in the architecture department in order to understand how much capacity of product we're going to put, the lines of the product, and the identity that we are going to display for this specific region. So in that case, we work hand in hand, which is perfect. And sometimes you have the visual merchandising that comes as a backup. So whenever we have questions of how much products are we going to put, if it's going to be more of a flagship or it's not going to be more of a flagship, it's going to be a less, entre guillemets, it's going to be less important of a boutique. This is where we just take the support of the visual merchandising, and in that case, it's more for them to be working more of a pop-up-ish kind of seasonal design, and we are doing just the big cock, the shell of the shop.
Okay. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
If we can just continue in that logic of picking up a project and starting with a brief and coordinating with different teams in order to develop the interior. Let's talk a little bit about the specifics of a project in terms of timelines. I mean, when a project is conceived, how much time does it take between all of the revisions and all of the discussions
That
before it
is
is
a very
realized?
big question. That's a very big question, and it differs so much from a brand to another, and it differs from the line of the project to another. So if it's a flagship, it's something. If it's a corner, it's something else. So mainly, let's say a boutique, a freestanding shop that is by itself on a street. Um, this is something, of course, it differs from a brand to another. It's
Sure.
if you're talking about a very sleek design, for example, like Yves Saint Laurent or Givenchy, where it's you have the pure lines, you have the very it's not minimalistic, but it's a little bit very
Pure, pure.
direct. It's a pure design. It's directed to just to simplify and to make more to shed more light actually on the product. This is going to be a little bit shorter in terms of time comparing to my other experience at Le Boutin, where you have um, a design is a little bit more. I'm not going to say advanced because it's not. We're not giving
Comparison.
comparison. It's more artistic, let's say. It's more
Mm.
artistic. So you have a lot of work on materials. You have an extreme big work on art products because as a person, Christian Louboutin is someone that is very much in touch with art, and you have to see this, and he wants to show this in his designs,
Mm-hmm.
in his designs and in his architecture, because everything is related to whatever he has done actually in his life. So
Okay.
it's his homes.
So
Yeah,
we're talking about designs that are more elaborate or less elaborate, or maybe in if we had put it in these terms, straightforward or more complex.
exactly. So whenever it's corners, of course, there's a difference between the fashion and the cosmetics. Cosmetics is a little bit faster. Everything should be very fast. You have to have, it takes 3 weeks of designing, 2, 3 weeks of appel d'offre when you're giving your shop drawings in order to have the contractors give you back how much money it's going to cost, and the production that takes mostly in all projects. This is something that I have realized, that it takes around 7 to 8 weeks of construction. Of
Okay.
course, the choice of
The
your contractor.
material of the
Exactly.
finishing.
And the choice of the contractor is going to be based on how big the project is. If it's a luxury brand, if it's a mass and a department store shop.
Okay, perfect. Some people might be curious to know if execution, for example, is done locally, or do you favor, for example, a type of execution that is done in one country and then transported to the other? In terms of timelines, does this help or not? Oh,
It, uh, can you please repeat the question?
we were talking earlier that sometimes we might develop concepts in different countries. For example, for one
Yes.
brand, let's say the Bhutan. Do you conception might be done in France, for example, but execution does have to be in the local country where the boutique is going to open, or can you transport or move concepts in terms of production from one country to the other?
There is one word is key for this: money.
Yeah, okay.
So money does magic. Sometimes you can do it locally. If the brand has the connection locally, this is something that is super important for every single brand to have the knowledge of knowing wherever they're opening a shop, if it's going to be less expensive doing it there or not, or it's going to be more expensive. An
Hmm.
example that I've realized when I was working for Givenchy in the Middle East, um, I realized that they were favoring the fact that they know already contractors in Italy, in China, uh, or in Spain. Um, they're favoring just for the fact that they know that they do the job very well. But given the fact that I was working for them for that specific period of time, and I realized that I have some contacts. Let's use these contacts, and maybe they're gonna be they're gonna be less expensive. And I realized that it was drastically less expensive.
Mm.
So,
So
and
it's a
this
matter
is,
of connection, a
it's a
matter
matter
of
of connection.
connections. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, your
Yes.
supply chain and your stakeholders. Perfect. This is really something important, and I think many people are always curious to know how these concepts are are moved from country to country. Let's talk now about
There is one more thing I wanted to talk about for the concept. You
sure.
can have for every brand, even if it's one visual identity and it's one brand identity, for each brand, they might have different concept and different designs. Sometimes it's about how expensive they want to go, and sometimes it's more about the design itself. They like to have different types of design. Example, for Christian Louboutin, they have three types of design. You have the Portuguese homes of Louboutin. You have the Parisian garden, and you have the circus. So these are three different concepts, and it depends on the culture where they want to implement that boutique. It depends on that. This is how they choose the concept.
Okay, great. So the concepts would always be related to the brand identity. However, the local choice would reflect, of course, the identity of customers of that particular country or
Yes.
location. Okay, now we're going to talk about the interior and the atmospherics, the importance of the design and the creation of the ambience and everything that can create a type of experience to those visiting these stores that are being designed.
Okay.
So, do you ever think about these levels or these variables in terms of designing your atmosphere, or how well do we think of our atmosphere in order to help it create that effect on customers?
We are getting to a point where, especially big brands, we get to a point where we want to innovate. We want to do something that is super interesting, that people would come and say like, "Wow, this is something that we would like to we would like to get something from this brand." But I don't see that we are making a lot of effort in order to mix all the senses, for example, or to make to use all the elements that we can use in order to bring up innovation in our boutiques. And the small problem that is super big, of course, it's always money. It's
Mm.
always the capex, the opex, how financially we're going to make things done. If we're going to import or we're going to export from that place, the amount, the rate of changes between a country to another. So all of these will make the innovation as a second degree, let's say.
So we're trying to innovate. We have the will to innovate. However, we do not always have the ways or the financial capabilities to do so.
Exactly.
Uh, and therefore, we're sacrificing, the urge to create that extra mile in our retail design for the sake of money.
Exactly.
However, we have seen that some brands and some makeup brands, for example, are injecting lots of technological items or lots of spaces where customers can get in closer touch with the brand. Can you talk about these new pods, testing spaces that are being injected in retail?
Yes, I actually worked with Shiseido lately in last year, end of last year, and there is something called the day mirror. So the day mirror is an interactive screen. You have your products on that interactive screen, and you have all your senses are going to be stimulated by this day mirror. So you have the creams that you want to test. You have a difference of colors between the creams, and different of colors, it differs from a line of product to another line of product. And there is one thing that was super interesting is whenever you pass next to it, it attracts your eye directly to be a little bit more intrigued and wanting to test these products. This was something that was conceived specifically for Printemps.
The department, the French department store.
The French department Printemps, it was done in 2017. But the process of working on such element is super long, and it's extremely expensive. Again, I'm sorry, I'm talking always about expenses because this is something that we have daily problems with, even with big brands. We don't believe that big brands have always
The
so much
budgets.
money.
Yeah.
Exactly, because it's not only them who decide about the budget. It's as well it's part of the department store. Sometimes the department store injects a little bit of money, so it's sometimes it merges both of them in order to make a project. And sometimes, whenever, for example, it's in other areas like the Middle East or USA, it's the department store that pays everything. So these projects differs from a region to another. So the process of making a true innovative experience, it's a little bit hard to do it sometimes. And yeah, so I was talking about the day mirror. The day mirror, we made it for Printemps, and we wanted to deploy it in other areas of the world. So there was only one market that accepted the day mirror. It's not, and in that case, it wasn't about how expensive it was. They just told us that it wasn't interesting for them. For example, the UK accepted the day mirror in specific points of sale. You had John Lewis who accepted it. You have Harrods that accepted it, but other department store that it wasn't accepted for them. And we used to use it, for example, and in Paris, for example.
I think we had, yes,
I'm back.
I think, yes, okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Paris, the
Yeah.
mirror acceptance in Paris.
The day mirror in Paris was not accepted, for example, because in that case it was a question of budget. In Spain, in a very specific point of sale, they accepted it, and another they didn't because they felt that it wasn't that much valued by the department store itself. So the concept is there, the way of making it is there, but sometimes it's a blockage from the department store itself.
If they don't, so if the department store doesn't see a necessity, or if this innovation wouldn't yield positive returns for them, they would think that this budget wouldn't be allocated in the right place. So this is
Exactly.
a very important point, because at some places we look at retailers saying we need innovation, and when innovation is there, we say that we don't need it because it's costing us a lot of money. But
That was a
this,
struggle of 9 months.
I believe that that you have to endure lots of tension on a daily basis. But it's really interesting.
Internal and external. Internal within the brand and external with your markets. So you have to make everyone happy, and good luck with that.
Sure. And Nabil, you mentioned earlier, maybe we could join these ideas together. You mentioned earlier that sometimes there are designs of stores, like standalone stores, that are the typical points of sales, or concessions, store in department stores, or flagship stores. When designing, for example, a flagship store, would you be more inclined to inject things that are more curious or attractive to the customer, even if they do not return, uh, have many monetary returns, if we should put it this way?
Of course. It's funny how it's funny really how it differs from working on a normal project and working on a flagship. The flagship, you're gonna work on the design, you're gonna put everything that you have in it, and you're not gonna think about the budget that much.
Mm,
And it's whenever you're going to do the appel d'offre, and you're going to see the where with which contractor you're going to work. You give them the project. You tell them,
go
bunch,
crazy.
let's not go crazy. Bonne chance. Try to find us a little money, and we can lower, we can downgrade some specific elements, yes, but we want to make the project stay as it is.
Okay.
So, but on the other hand, whenever you're working on a less, it's not on a flagship actually, on a normal corner or a normal boutique, a freestanding or a corner, you're going to always take care of the budget,
Yes.
and you have the specific design for it. So you don't put all your best details of architecture in it.
Okay. So you you
Did I
you you
answer your
have to.
question? I'm not sure
Yes,
if I answered
sure,
your.
sure, yes. So just to make that point clear, because we always look at flagship stores and how they are theatrical, how sometimes design had exploded, and we see that the brands really inject a lot of creativity, and at a certain point, people could be able to make purchases in retail, because at the end of the day, making purchases is at the heart of any retail operations. And as you said, in standalone stores or concessions, we are less developed in terms of design, or we have details that are more commercial, maybe, or
Yes.
that could reflect the brand identity, but that do not go to that extra level.
So
And
we always try, for example, if you are using brass, for example, at in the flagship, you're always going to look for an alternative for the normal shop. So you're gonna have the same visually, the same effect, but the material is going to be less noble. This is
mm,
how they use it in terms of architecture here in their architecture departments.
okay, less noble design. Perfect. That we're going to look at in a minute. But
Less noble materials as well.
material. We talked earlier about the stimulation of the five senses. I mean, traditionally, when we read about sensorial marketing, it's a game of combining together light, music, odor, etc. Do you study these things beforehand and keep them in mind when you are designing? I mean, do you think about the light intensity or the music or the smells in a shop in order to engage people's senses when visiting the store?
It's specific to brands. So it's specific to brands whenever it comes to fashion, but it's essential. It's super essential for the cosmetics, because this is exactly what we are looking for in the cosmetics. You're gonna talk about a lot of light, and the light is you're gonna have a lot of problems with the light because it interferes with the product. So whenever you are using the product, it has to be always to be cool. It should not be hot, because
Mm,
it's gonna deteriorate the product. The music, of course, because if you are working, for example, for a high-end cosmetics, you're gonna have like these small bubbles where the customer is going to enter in order to feel the all-in-all experience with touching the product, with applying the product on the face, with seeing yourself using the product. So all of this, you are using the five senses.
Yes.
And the fashion is going to be less important. We talk about where we're going to put our speakers, but we're not going to talk about what kind of mood we're going to give for the customer. Mostly it's just in the fashion, it's going to be just how the customer is going to feel in that specific boutique.
Okay. If we're going to also, we moved a level up from sensory marketing tools to experiential marketing tools. And now this word experience has become a cliche. And we are thinking about it in terms of designs, and sometimes we are seeing that designing experiences for retail is really important, however, not always viable in terms of project. But how can we inject experiences, even though we are not being able to do them today? But what are your future projections to injecting more experiences in retail?
And that's going to be super personal. I've been thinking since the days that I was studying architecture, and specifically here, and when I was in France, I'm always looking for something that is super modulable, so super modular. So that kind of architecture, when you are always being able to, at a specific time, change and make this space flip from one side to another, this is how I like to make the experience change for the customer. It's like you're going, for example, to a museum. You are seeing the piece of art, and the piece of art is going to be changed. The perception of that piece of art is going to be changed by the context around it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you want it to elevate it much more. Sometimes you want to make it blend in a way with a context, with an atmosphere. This is how I personally want to make it a little bit more. This is the experience that I want to give the customers. So what I've realized in that way of making this concept work is that you have to use a lot of light, you have to use a lot of music, you have to use a lot of projections, so you can go super low on the shell of the place. You can make it completely white and use projections on that place in order to make it change, because we are dealing with super innovative elements now, with projecting, with 3D mapping, with all the technologies that we have now. So we have to use, and we have to be updated with all of this in order to make it more and more innovative.
Perfect. We're going to talk about these tiny spaces in a bit. I need to also highlight with people who are watching us today the importance of people in retail spaces. People really like to shop, but most of all, they also like the social experience related to their visit to the store, or to the department store, or to the flagship store. So, do you take also into consideration into creating a social dimension related to your store's design?
Can you repeat the question in another way? Because I don't want to say something that I want to make sure that I understood.
Yes. When we're talking about designing spaces, do we take into consideration also the number of people that are going to be visiting the space and the interaction that people might have inside that space?
Of course. Yeah. Um, you, I think, yeah, I think this is,
Why am I asking this? Because I'm curious to look at several concepts when visiting, especially department stores. We used to go to the department stores and see spaces that are closed. I mean, the customer has to be served over a counter.
yeah.
More and more, when we moved throughout these decades, we are looking at spaces that have become more open, where people could go into a space, and a person with her friend, with her mother, with her peer, and they could together enjoy looking at a product, etc. I mean, design has been changing in retail and has been allowing the customer to get in closer contact with the brand. We see that some brands are doing this more, and some other brands are being more conservative and still stick to the old ways of designing. So mainly this is somehow the question that I wanted to ask. To what extent do we engage with people in these spaces, and we allow them to get in that close proximity with the brand and its products?
So I believe, this is my point of view, personal. It's just the brand identity that decides that. So if, for example, you're talking about Dior, Dior is not going to be mixed, for example, in a department store next to other brands that they don't feel that it's on the same. They
Positioning.
target the same clients. So even if you are even in a department store, for example, if you're at Printemps or Lafayette, you're gonna have the illusion of a shell that differ that segments between a brand and another, and it's not going to be there in order not to make them feel that they have an upper hand on other brands. But it is always going to be like this. So the lineup of the project, the brand identity is always going to take over the fact that it's going to be an open shell or it's going to be a closed shell. If
Okay.
the brand want to segment each other from segment itself from a separate from other brands, or it's going to be mixed with other brands.
Okay, thank you. This answers perfectly my question. Now we're going to conceptualize our discussion and join it a little bit with what we discussed on this page. I mean, we look at pop-up stores and pop-up store designs, and these types of stores are stores that are highly experiential and that engage the customers to the extreme. Most of the times, these pop-up stores could happen in boutiques or in modular spaces as the ones you have discussed. Now, there are no rules for this discussion or the answers that we give, but most people and most brands are looking at ways to inject experiences in their retail spaces. In your opinion, how can we design spaces that are small or bigger and that could help the customer live something really new and different when it comes to joining the retail or the brand?
It's a very nice question because it's going to reconnect with something that we already discussed, which is the work between the VM and the architecture department. I believe it's mostly a work hand in hand between these two that would make this specific point work so well, is the fact that the VM should understand and the brand it should understand that it should not display everything they have.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the space, depending on the collection, depending on how important the launch that they are doing is important for them. This is how they make the space uses itself to the maximum in order to serve the product, the line, or the collection that they are showing. Specifically in pop-up. In pop-up, you're not going to come and put the 25 dresses that the collection is showing off. You're going to put three, and you're gonna make the experience of the rest revolving around the collection. So you can have the screens, you can have the music, you can have whatever you want, but make it a little bit less. And in that case, less is more, even if it was a very flamboyant flamboyant brand, like for example, Givenchy, not Givenchy, pardon. If it was Versace, or if it was Dolce and Gabbana, it's always with ornaments. It's always very nicely rich, but in order to make your product show off more, put one or two designs, and the rest can be just the experience out of it.
So we're talking about exclusivity and selective choices that would appeal more to the customer and make him maybe want more or look for more.
Exactly.
And have you been also working or thinking of types of spaces, as you said, like these shell spaces that could rotate in terms of design? Have you experienced these types of brands or had the chance to work such types of projects?
We got super close to starting to work something like this, but it's always the budget that comes in, and you have the brand that comes and tells you that we want to show more, even if it's a pop-up, we want to sell more. But there is something that we should understand, that the brand should understand that a pop-up is a pop-up in order to make more visibility and to show off more the brand, not in order to transform the person having this experience to a customer. I
Okay,
hope the same.
Nabil, I am curious. I mean, the question just popped in. We said that interior designing and visual merchandising should work hand in hand. But did you or wouldn't you believe that you should have some directive related to the marketing and communications of the brand in terms of design? Or it doesn't happen in your line of
It does. It does. It does. It's something. It's something that we specifically more in the cosmetics. So this is something that we do. In fashion, having the marketing working with us is barely there, because the marketing is more of a digital marketing, and it's more of exposure for the brand. In cosmetics, we work more with marketing, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. When we're saying that spaces, this is my last space-related question. When we're saying that spaces should be functional, to what extent you take into consideration the merchandise and the level of stock that is going to be allocated inside the space?
This is how much space the department store they give us.
Okay, all right. So there's
On the back,
always the
on the back of house. But whenever you're talking about
yeah.
freestanding shops, there is a huge importance for for the stock and for the back of house. And it's mostly it should always be around 10% of the all in all space. This is what this is the norms that we use in more or less in flagship, I guess. A little bit less in normal boutiques.
Okay, perfect. Now we have to move on to your indications and tips in terms of designing experiential spaces. I mean, in your opinion, what should a retail designer think of every time he conceives a project in order to make the most of the design, experiential design?
So, this is something that we talked about already. So less is more. Less we are talking about less products, not less in design. Modular. And for me, there is something that should always go with the generation that we are living in now. So it's the perfect mix between everything that these generations are interested in. So you have the innovation in music, the innovation in terms of colors, and it's an all-in-all work, I believe. I don't know if I can say that, but there is one thing, something that I wrote today, and I believe that this is key for everything. It's just do it well or don't do it at all. If you are doing something and you are focusing on the budget and you are focusing on how much you're going to sell, and if you are mixing all of these together as a brand, I think just don't do it. Simplify it in your head, make it into one product, value this one product, and make this whole experience around it, and go for it. But if you want to put everything in in a small or a big space, it doesn't matter how big the space is, just don't do it. Because we are reflecting the brand. If the brand is just here to sell, or the brand is here to entertain and sell, of course the brand is here to sell. But are you here only for this? This should not be the target of the brand.
The sole
At least it should not
purpose.
show.
Okay. So it's really important to have a clear directive, a clear objective of what the brand should be doing. And then when it comes to design, it has to have also these clear directives, reflect them, and share them, at least when we said sharing them with visual merchandisers to have a better outcome. And then everything related to the quality. We're saying, did we use the term quality of the detailing and the choices that have to be done from one location to the other, or one space to the other. And when it comes to your tips, if we just put them in three most important ideas, it's going to be, as we said,
Simplify it.
simplify it. Modular.
Modular.
Yes, and doing it well or not doing it at all. Perfect.
Exactly.
And Nabil, would you have to, or should you have to put a final word for everyone who has been listening, or maybe an advice related to design? Do you have anything else you would like to add?
There is something that I would really like to say, that in case it was interesting for everyone. So whenever they have questions about all of these things, if they can just send us these questions by direct messages, and hopefully if we do that again, we can answer all of these questions. And it was a very nice
Conversation, chit chat. Perfect. So we're inviting everyone to send in any particular questions or cases they would like to ask about, and we will try to do a next episode, hopefully, and talking about more specificities related to design.
Perfect.
And I hope that everyone enjoyed this session. Thank you all for joining. Nabil, you have had a million waves, a million hearts, and lots of beautiful comments. Thank you all, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Nabil, for your time. And I'll just remind everyone that all of these episodes will be available on IGTV and on YouTube, and all the details will be included in the post. Thank you again, Nabil, and have a nice evening.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.